The Revenge of the Wizard's Ghost by John Bellairs, Chapter 11. By the eternal powers, the professor crowed, swinging his fist in the air. I knew I could figure it out, and I did. Everybody in the church turned and looked at the professor. Alarmed, Fergie jumped and started pushing the professor out of the pew. Come on, for gosh sakes, he whispered excitedly. We gotta get out of here. They'll call the police or something. Come on. The professor was still grinning like a fool as he sidled out of the pew and walked quickly out of the church, followed by Fergie. Halfway down the sidewalk, the professor turned and grabbed Fergie by the shoulders. His eyes were wild and bulging. His face was getting very red. Byron, he exclaimed breathlessly. Don't you understand? I did it. I was right when I guessed what old Zeb was up to. Ensign French isn't a person. It's a code. Do you want to know what it means? Fergie was thoroughly alarmed by now. He had been worrying lately that the professor might be losing his marbles, and now he was sure of it. But he had heard that you ought to humor crazy people, so he forced himself to smile politely. That's nice, sir, he said nervously. Why don't we go back to the hotel and talk, okay? The professor let go of Fergie's shoulders and gave him a disgusted look. Oh, come off it, Byron, he growled. You think I've flipped my lids here trying to be nice to me till you can call the boys with the white coats. But I'm not insane, and if you'll give me 5 seconds, I'll prove it to you. He took a deep breath and let it out. Look, he began, holding up his forefinger. While we were in that church, I saw a shield in one of the windows. The shield has a name. It's called the France Ancient. You follow me so far? Good. Well, earlier this morning I was reading Shakespeare, and you may remember I mentioned that ancient used to mean ensign. So if you take the name Ensign French and change the first part of it, you get Ancient French, don't you? And if you flip-flop that name, you get French Ancient, which is almost the name of the blue shield with the silver lilies all over it. Do you see? Fergie felt a bit dizzy after this explanation. Yeah, I guess so, he said slowly. So do we have to go back to that church out at the estate and look for a shield like the one you saw in this church here? Yes, said the professor, nodding solemnly. That is exactly what we have to do. Heraldic shields are often used as decorations in old churches, and we will have to hunt until we find the right one. We'll go out there tonight. But first, I think we'd better go back to the hotel room and do a little planning. Also, we'll give the Dixons a phone call to find out how Johnny is getting along. Come on. Fergie and the professor walked quickly across the square to the hotel. They paused in the lobby to use the payphone, but the Dixons didn't answer. They're probably down at the hospital with Johnny, said the professor glumly as he hung up. I don't know what that means, but for the time being, we'd better try to keep the poor lad out of our minds. We have to concentrate on other things. A little after 7 o'clock, Fergie and the professor were standing outside the huge old stone church on the grounds of the Windrow estate. They were both dressed in their scruffy exploring clothes, and near them on the ground was their tool bag. As Fergie fiddled with his searchlight and shone the beam around, the professor puffed on one last cigarette. When it was finished, they were going into the church to hunt for the France Ancient shield. Overhead the stars shone, and a chilly night wind was blowing. It rustled the leaves of an oak tree that grew next to the mansion. You know something, Prof? Said Fergie thoughtfully. That shield we're looking for might not even be in the church. It might be someplace else. The professor grimaced and blew smoke out through his nose. I know, he muttered irritably. There isn't any logical reason why we should be looking for the shield in the church, if it exists at all. It might be in the mansion, or even in that little round temple over there in the woods. But the church seems to be a good place as any to start. Any objections? Fergie shook his head. Good, snapped the professor, and he threw his burned-out cigarette on the ground and stamped on it. I think that at last I am ready to... Oh, no, you don't suppose, do you, that... The professor's voice trailed off, and he dropped to his knees quickly. As Fergie watched in bewilderment, he unzipped the top of the tool bag and plunged his hand inside. Double phooey, growled the professor, and he stood up. I left both my stupid flashlights in the back seat of the stupid car. How could I have been such a nitwit? Well, I guess I'll just have to go back and get one of them. Fergie gave the professor an exasperated look. He had been living with this cranky old man for 3 days now, and he was beginning to get fed up. "Oh, come on, Prof," he said. "Are you going to go all the way back to the car just to get a dinky little flashlight? This one here is all we need." The professor took a deep breath and let it out. He was trying very hard to keep from losing his temper. "Byron," he said in a strained voice, "I know you think your searchlight is the greatest invention since the wheel, but my old nickel-plated flashlights are perfectly decent, and I've used them for over 20 years. I like them, and we may need them both before we're through. It'll take us about 3 minutes to scoot out to the car and get one itty-bitty flashlight. We'll be back here before you know it. How about it?" But Fergie was feeling stubborn. He folded his arms and turned away. "You go ahead if you want to, Prof," he muttered sullenly. "I'll just wait here for you. I'm not scared of the dark. Go on." The professor stared at Fergie in sheer exasperation. "Byron," he said, "have you flipped your wig? Think of the strange things that have happened to us at this place. We oughtn't to split up. It'll be very dangerous. Come on with me." Fergie glared defiantly at the professor. He knew in his heart that the old man was right, but he did not want to give in. "Nah, you go ahead," he said with a careless shrug. Then he added, "Why don't you leave me the holy water bottle? If any monsters come out of the woods to get me, I can spray the stuff at 'em. You know, like Black Flag insect spray. Come on, just give me the bottle." The professor clenched his fists. "Oh, very well," he growled and plunged his hand into the pocket in the front of his sweatshirt. He pulled out the plastic bottle and handed it to Fergie. "Here, hang on to this. I'll be right back." Snatching the flashlight from Fergie's hand, the professor stomped off into the darkness. For a few minutes, Fergie stood watching the spotlight's beam as it bounced along the ground. Then the professor passed behind some trees, and the light was gone. Fergie was alone. Whistling softly, he paced back